Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Surviving Bob Jones University, a Christian Cult, is a limited podcast by Andrew Pledger, which is coming on August the 23rd, 2023. The show is a thought-provoking podcast series that explores the history of Bob Jones University, the psychology of fundamentalism, the criteria for cults, and survivors' experiences. The series features diverse interviews with survivors including queer individuals from the Black, Indigenous, and people of colour community, women and men sharing their unique perspectives on the institution. Listeners gain insight into the strict rules, culture, and leadership of Bob Jones University, and how its fundamentalist beliefs have contributed to a toxic environment that prioritises indoctrination and conformity. The podcast showcases stories of resilience, healing, and growth from survivors who have overcome trauma and abuse at the Christian college. It offers an eye-opening exploration of cults' harmful impact on vulnerable individuals and communities. Subscribe to stay updated on the premiere of this podcast, which is coming August 23rd, Surviving BJU. Hello listeners, and welcome to this week's mini-series with special guest and podcast host Andrew Pledger. On Andrew's Instagram, his bio states that he is a queer cult survivor speaking up, empowering and educating other survivors. His initial podcast platform, Speaking Up with Andrew Pledger, has a similar format to this show, long-format interviews with survivors of cults, high-demand groups, and religious trauma. For all the links to Andrew's work, you can follow the links in the episode description. The first episode of his new podcast, Surviving Bob Jones University, airs next week, so make sure you head over and subscribe. Also, a reminder that August is International Cult Awareness Month, and by visiting internationalcultawarenessmonth.org, you can find lots of links to resources and calls to action on how you can support this awareness movement. Friend of the podcast, Esther Friedman, is running a fundraiser to raise money towards her brilliant memoir, The Gentle Soul's Revolution, about her time in the esoteric school known as Odyssey Study Group. Esther is hoping to make this available as an audiobook, so please consider donating towards Esther's crowdfunding efforts by following the links in the episode description. And lastly today, a massive huge thank you and welcome to my newest patron, Hydron. Thank you for being a supporter of my work and for supporting me in life. I am thankful for you every day. For anybody interested in full-length early episodes that are ad-free from the Cult Vault podcast, you can visit patreon.com/thecultvault and support the show from as little as £1 a month. But for now, here is Andrew. So hi, Andrew, and welcome to the show. I'm so glad that we're finally sitting down to have this conversation. It feels like it should have happened months ago. Would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Casey, for having me on. I'm so excited for this interview. And for people who do not know me, my name is Andrew Pledger, and I was raised in the IFB cult, which stands for Independent Fundamental Baptist. I was homeschooled my entire life for the purpose of indoctrination. Realized later in my teen years that I was queer, and that was something that was just not allowed in the IFB, that being gay in the IFB was something that was compared to murder, and you were compared to being a pedophile. So it was something that was very scary to realize about myself that I'm in that environment. And I graduated from being homeschooled in I think it was 2018. So I was homeschooled from 2005 to 2018. And then here, all these years of indoctrination, and I ended up going to Bob Jones University, which is a fundamentalist Christian college in Greenville, South Carolina. And through dealing with a lot of questioning a lot of issues, my sexuality and mental health, and realizing I had religious trauma, I eventually was able to escape that environment. And now, since I've been out over a year now, almost a year and a half, and I've been really sharing my story to encourage other survivors and also educate people on religious trauma, religious abuse, cults, just to give people that information to help them on their own journeys.
And some of that includes your own podcast work as well. So I wondered if you could give us a brief overview of the various projects that you're currently involved in.
Yeah, so my first podcast, Speaking Up with Andrew Pledger, I started that to really give a voice to other survivors, for people who have survived high control religions or various cults, because I realized the power of a survivor telling their story in a space where they can be seen, heard, and understood and really be validated. And because I was expelled from Bob Jones University for telling my story. And really knew, I realized the power of a survivor from that personal experience. And I wanted to give that space for other people to do the same. And so that's been going on. It's been last week, it's been 1 year since I've been doing it, which is exciting. And I'm recently I announced that I'm working on a limited podcast that's a separate one from my current one. It's called Surviving Bob Jones University, a Christian Cult. And it's a limited podcast. I think it's going to be end up being 15 episodes total. But that's going to be coming out in the summer of 2023. And I'm excited because you're gonna get to hear different survivor stories, but it's also a bit of a like documentary style also. So I'll be covering the history of Bob Jones University, the psychology of fundamentalism, the criteria of cults. Rachel Bernstein is going to be coming on, and I know Danielle Messinek Young, she's also coming on to talk about group behavior. So I'm really, really excited, especially for that project.
That sounds absolutely incredible. I come across things all the time where I think, wow, I would love to sit down and just do a limited series deep dive into that particular subject. I thought when I first started reading about this Liana Shanti online guru character, I thought, wow, wouldn't that be so good to do a deep dive on that subject? But it just takes up so much time. So you're balancing your own deconstruction and recovery along with your work helping others around their
Mhm.
religious trauma recovery. And now you're working on this limited series. It sounds absolutely amazing. And you do the occasional promotional work for the Indoctrination podcast as well.
Yes, I am the social media manager for the Indoctrination podcast, which I've just absolutely loved. And it's also been a year since I've been working with Rachel and Rob, who's also a producer on the show. So it's been really great.
Shout out to Rachel and Rob. Those two are amazing. Rob is super helpful and has the really nicest things to say about my work and everyone else's work in the space. So that's really cool. It's nice to get to know the people behind the scenes of things, because sometimes these shows don't just happen on their own, and sometimes they do. So kudos to you and your work, Andrew. It's awesome. You've been so busy since you have moved away from this previous existence. I suppose it's almost like you have changed into somebody completely different, or at least been able to outwardly change into somebody completely different, like a metamorphosis.
Yes, yeah. I think in that really high control environment, especially, I didn't realize it to the extent to when I left, because when it's all you've known, you have really nothing else to compare it to. But I didn't realize how far I was really repressing myself and putting on a persona to survive, or putting on an identity to survive. And then once I was out of that high control environment, I was really surprised at all the different things that came up, and also behaviors that changed, I think, in my own life.
Well, I'm really looking forward to getting into all of that stuff today and breaking down some of the main themes within your story that starts with the IFB. And I think sometimes there can be a bit of confusion around this group and the IBLP and whether it's a movement or whether it's a sect. And I wondered if you could just break it down for us today. What is the IFB and what does the history of this particular movement look like?
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Yes. So for people who aren't familiar, I'll repeat it again. It stands for Independent Fundamental Baptist. And I think what is really important for people to understand before I dig into all the specifics, the basis of this movement was really started because of fear of the outside world, fear of secular education, fear of information that contradicted their fundamentalist beliefs, and fear of other people who believe differently, and fear of people who did not believe at all. So it has this very separatist mindset of we have to isolate and get away from society, and we even have to get away from people, even other Christians who don't believe what we believe. And so just for kind of the history, so the IFB movement really emerged in the early 20th century as a reaction to what some conservative Christians saw as a growing influence of liberal theology and also modernism in mainstream Protestant denominations. So originally, you just have these regular Baptist denominations, and there are people within those that were really more extreme. And they're like, we don't like where this is going. We want to have our own, and I don't want to call it a denomination because it doesn't, that's the thing about independent fundamental Baptist churches. There's no higher organization holding them accountable. Each of these churches can function and do whatever they want without any accountability and without any oversight. And so that's, I think, the scary thing about the IFB. And sadly, there has been so much abuse that has been uncovered. But kind of getting back into the history, so these people felt that exposure to secular education or information was a threat to them. And so they wanted to really find the people who agreed with them, isolate from society, control the information they were into, and indoctrinate upcoming members into that system to keep it going because they believed their way was the only way. And that they were like, this is in air quotes, the most Christian or the best Christians, I guess you would say in a sense. And so just a quick overview of some of their teachings. They believe in a literal interpretation of the Bible. So they believe that God created the world in 6 days and that the world is between 6,000 to 10,000 years old. I know, it's so ridiculous. So they believe that the Bible is the word of God and the truth, and they specifically claim that the King James version of the Bible is the only legitimate word of God. No other version of the Bible is legitimate. All the other versions are influenced by Satan, and Christians who believe differently are also, in some sense, under influence of Satan. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. So hell is a big emphasis in the IFB movement, and they're very fear-based. So hell is a place of eternal torture. They believe that Jesus Christ came here to save us from that. And they call it the plan of salvation. And growing up, it was called the ABCs. So like, admit you're a sinner, believe Jesus died on the cross, confess your sins. And once you do that, you are saved. and no one can take that away from you. So they claim to provide for you security in your eternal salvation. Now, the catch with this was they would claim that, oh, we're not legalistic, even though they would have all these rules they would impose. They were like, legalists tell you that you have to work your way to heaven. We don't believe that. You can just believe and say this prayer, and no one can take that away from you. But the catch was with that is they would always try to make you doubt if you were saved or not. And usually signs that you were not saved were usually things like, oh, you didn't desire to read the Bible, you didn't desire to pray, you didn't desire to volunteer in the church or help them out. But you didn't desire to tithe, which we were expected or really required. Everyone was required to give 10% of their income. And from a young age, I was required by my parents to give 10% of my allowance. And even in my teen years, when I had my own job, my parents would ask, where's your 10% of your check so we can put it? Because we were told that God would not bless us if we did not give 10% of our income to the church. And so I digressed a little bit. That's a little overview of their teachings. So, like I said, 20th century is when this started, and it really got, I think, big again in the 1950s and 60s, I would say. Especially as they established more churches, and Bible colleges were a big part of their expansion. Specifically, they would create these independent Baptist colleges that were basically ministry based to just pump out all these different pastors to plant all these independent fundamental Baptist churches across America to spread what they believe was the absolute truth, and that it was their mission and their purpose on earth to save people from eternal damnation. And this was the only way. This was God's plan. And so in the 1970s and 80s, there was a lot of criticism for it seemed to be very legalistic, authoritarian, and there was a lot of lack of accountability. But despite that, in 1972, Hyles Anderson College was started, and Jack Hyles was a really leading figure in the IFB movement. He had a massive church called First Baptist of Hammond, Indiana, and that he had a bus ministry. And for people who don't know, a bus ministry was when the church would send buses out into the surrounding city or county and bring or bus people in to church, and what they saw as a ministry to get the gospel to people to save them from hell. And so Jack Hyles was a big figure. He was born in 1926 and he died in 2001. And another big figure in this movement was John R. Rice. He was born in 1895, died in 1980. He was a Baptist evangelist, and he was the founding editor of the Sword of the Lord, which was an influential fundamentalist newspaper. It was really propaganda that promoted the fundamentalist ideology. Curtis Hudson, he was another evangelist that was really big in this movement. He was the editor for the Sword of the Lord. Lester Roloff, he's another person that's really famous in this movement, and he was born in 1914, died in 1982. He was an IFB preacher, and he's most known for being the founder of teen homes across the American South. He's primarily known for his Rebecca home for girls, which has been put in a lot of spotlight for the abuse that has been coming out from his teen homes. And those are some of like the big major people that really pushed this movement. And I think I said that Jack Hyles, he started Hyles Anderson College, which that's where my parents met. My dad was studying to be a pastor, and my mom was studying to be a school teacher. And another person that was still influential in the movement, not as big as the others, was Brother Bobby Robertson, which he was the pastor of the church that I was raised in. He was mainly known a lot more within IFB circles. When you met someone and you talked about him, they would just go crazy about him. And I noticed this from a young age, how obsessed people seemed to be with him. And it was very eerie to me, even from a young age, being indoctrinated. But Yeah, so he pastored Gospel Light Baptist Church in Walkertown, North Carolina, and I think he pastored it for over 60 years until his death in 2018. And so yeah, so that's just kind of an overview of the movement. And I think for other colleges that were also a big part of the movement, were Pensacola Christian College, Bob Jones University, West Coast College, Crown College, and Tennessee Temple. They were also big and spreading IFB churches. So sorry, that's just a quick overview of that movement.
Don't apologize. That was amazing to hear the different key players, especially when you mentioned that it's not exactly like a hierarchical system that we might see in the Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, where you can track the leadership throughout the
Mhm.
different tiers or the different levels. Of course, some of the congregations that we talk about and some of the church groups that exist might have hierarchies inside of them. It's not like we're talking about a governing body sitting at the top there to kind of changing the way things happen. It reminds me a little bit of the churches of Christ in that way. Do you feel like there could be a parallel, or is that completely different?
I'm not I'm not really familiar with how the churches of Christ function, but I think you are right in this sense. Yes, there's no governing body. Each of these churches, they are hierarchical in and of themselves, but they're isolated hierarchies, I guess you would say, of how they function. And it's always the pastor at the top in these churches, and God is, of course, at the very top, which God doesn't really do anything in these churches. It's really the pastor, and then usually what I would call like the inner circle, which are usually the dean. What are the I forget the names. I feel like they're called the deans. What are they called? Damn it. But yeah, the pastor usually has like an inner circle of these. Usually it's like I feel like it's like 6 to 10 members who know of like everything that's going on in the church, basically.
I wonder what would happen if you were to get all of the pastors of each independent church group together in one room to see if any of them would claim to be closer to God or holier than the rest of the pastors in the room, because I feel like it is lending itself to competitiveness. Was there ever a time, maybe we're jumping ahead here, but was there ever a time where different church groups and congregations would meet up? But sometimes that happens in other groups, and things could get a bit hairy in those situations.
Yeah, it's interesting because with the IFB, they have that very like us versus them mindset. So we would only be around people who are exactly like us. We wouldn't really get involved with other churches. There was that sense, like you said, competitiveness because there was a time, I think it happened around like the early 2010s when there was a great exodus from the church that I grew up in, and there was another church. It was not affiliated with the IFB, and it was more contemporary. And this was so upsetting. And so instead of the church being like, oh, maybe we're causing issues, maybe we have problems, and that's why we're pushing people away. No, they did not consider that. This was Satan. Satan was leading people away from the church. They wanted to compromise and go to a different church that was entertaining or wasn't as strict to God's word as they were. Like the IFB sees themselves as the golden standard of Christianity. And if you don't follow their way and you're still maybe a Christian and you might agree with some core things, but if you don't follow their strict code of strict code of conduct and take on their strict lifestyle, you're really looked down upon in a sense. It's just really like superiority complex, I think, going on in these environments where I think a lot of these people feel really insecure about themselves. And it feels so good to be given these rules and to be told this is what God wants you to do, and you do them, and you believe that God loves you more or cares about you more or is more happy with you because you're following these rules. So there was definitely a lot of looking down on other churches that were different. Now, when it came to like socializing with other IFB churches, that didn't happen much. We would have like a youth conference every summer, which different congregations would come in, but because my church ran that, they chose the speakers and they chose what ideology would be pushed. So they have the control in that. And our church would also host the National Sword of the Lord conference every year, which usually a bunch of famous IFB pastors would come to that, and it would be basically like a revival type thing. And I think it was a way for IFB pastors to socialize with each other, to encourage each other, I guess, as they're doing their ministries.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.
I hear with some other groups that they have like feasts and tabernacles and gatherings and months and months and months of preparation go into hosting one of these things, and their congregation wants to be seen as the one that hosts the best dinner and has the best home cooked food, and all of the children are expected to get involved and clean the floors of the buildings where these things will take place. And I just always find it interesting to draw those parallels between different groups. I think it's interesting that the IFB doesn't have more of that, but there are certain aspects and elements that come into some of the IFB's communities when you start to look at things like the IBLP,
Mm-hmm.
which is slightly different, but I feel like has more of a, groups get together with same belief systems but underneath somebody else's guidance, and that would be Bill Gothard. So that's a whole other thing
Mm-hmm.
that we can talk about, I suppose,
Mm-hmm.
when we discuss your homeschooling, because Bill Gothard is a figure who put together certain homeschooling packages under the different business ventures that he ran. And I don't know what your homeschooling curriculum looked like and if it was anything to do with him, but when it comes to the IFB and Bill Gothard, all I really know of homeschooling is his contribution to that work. So maybe you can offer us something outside of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, like I was looking back, I was surprised that my parents did not use his curriculums. I didn't know about it growing up. What curriculum I used growing up, or my parents used, it was called a Becca. And this is specifically an IFB curriculum, and it was produced by Pensacola Christian College, which is also IFB. And it was actually the college my parents really, really tried to get me to go to. But I did not. I ended up at Bob Jones instead, but I digress a little bit. So just for a little overview of a Becca, it's basically it is fundamentalist propaganda, um, and also science textbooks published by Abeka defy the scientific consensus regarding the origins of the universe, origins of life, and evolution. Abeka takes the biblical literalist and young earth creationist positions in this curriculum, and it teaches the Genesis creation narrative as a literal and factual account. And these textbooks denounces evolution as a retreat from science. So I think it's what's important for people to understand about Abeka is anything that contradicted the IFB teachings, they would twist it. So I remember being taught growing up that evolution was just completely stupid, and that people who believed in evolution was stupid. And I hate even saying believe in evolution. I don't think that's an accurate way to say that. I think understanding evolution, I think that's a better way to say that. And they would find ways to weave the Bible throughout all the textbooks, even math. There would be a Bible verse on a stinking math page. They would somehow weave it in there that you would memorize about like working hard or something, or doing everything to the glory of God or whatever. And I would even have, Bible as a subject in and of itself, really to be indoctrinated into the IFB's position. So I was taught through Rebecca that the KJV is the only legitimate word of God, that it was like the first English translation, and that is the perfect, infallible, and would be taught how to argue that. I remember doing a whole textbook in a semester that was on Revelation and about the end times, and how to know that, oh, if you're saved, God's going to come back, and you'll be brought up because you accept this ideology, and all these other people would suffer. And it talked about all the signs and prophecies of different things that would happen. And so, yeah, so they had their own Bible textbook that I would do every semester in homeschooling. And in addition to that, my mom would do like a daily devotional every day, and we had Bible verses that we would memorize. And also, a part of my homeschooling was being involved with this Bible club from my church, which was called Masters Club. And I think it's a terrible name, but it's just not politically correct at all. But it was a Bible club. The best I could explain it was like Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, but like the Bible. So you would have all, I think each year you would have a different textbook that you would work through that would have different badges. There was a section on different, you would have to memorize a certain amount of verses and get badges. You would maybe like another badge be like helping your neighbor, doing something for your neighbor, and then sharing the gospel with them. There was also a good news badge where you would have to share the gospel with so many people, and then you would get a badge. So just continuing of the indoctrination, basically. And my parents controlled every aspect of my life. Very strict rules. Not allowed to listen to secular music, not even allowed to listen to contemporary Christian music, no Harry Potter, no cards, no going to movie theaters. I'm trying to remember others. And like there were some rules that were imposed on us from specifically our church. And I just, when I got out, and really some when I was in it, realized the control, I guess you would say, or the influence that my pastor had over my parents, because they would do basically whatever he said. And there would be things in my life where like, oh, I want to do this. And like, I want to go to the movie theater. Oh, well, Brother Bobby teaches and preaches about we're not supposed to go to the movie theater. There are movies that promote sin, and maybe if we went to the theater and saw a kids movie, that's fine. But what if someone saw us leaving the movie theater that went to our church? That would be put a bad testimony to us, and it would make God look bad. So we're not allowed. So growing up, I was never able to keep up with like the latest movies or newest music. The thing that was outside of the IFB that I was involved with was a 4-H club, which there were still Christians in that, but they were a lot more lax and had a more normal, balanced lifestyle. They didn't make religion the entire center of their entire world. People had a more balanced lifestyles, and my family really stood out. Like we were the weird ones in the homeschool group. Like we were the weird ones with the weird ones. Like, and so I never I never felt like I belonged growing up. I never really fit in. I always felt out of place. And I think that bothered my mom so much because she kind of felt ostracized, I think, in that environment, because in that group, it was awkward because there were also a lot of people that were in our homeschool group also that they used to go to our church, but they had left long before. So it's just kind of that awkward, oh yeah, you used to go to our church and you don't anymore. And it always kills my mom to see these women that used to be submissive, used to wear their dresses. Now they're out. They're no longer wearing dresses. They're now wearing pants and they're now more free. And I always felt like she would judge them for that. And I think, in a sense, my mom loved feeling persecuted and outcast for her faith. I think it made her feel special in a sense, or, oh, I'm better than them. And my mom would also, she would do this devotional series she would do one every semester with my homeschool group and get up and talk because it's what she felt like she was led to do. um and she was felt, I think, outcast also because she was like the only woman that would wear dresses or skirts because she felt that's what God was telling her to do. And I respect her personal religious beliefs and what she wants to do and all that, but to me it's like, don't force that on other people, or don't expect other people to have your same beliefs. And it always bothered me how much I think my parents looked down on other people who weren't like that. So yeah, and even in like the homeschool group and my 4-H club, which are both kind of interconnected, that was, I guess you would say, with more normal people, but I still felt so.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to chumbacasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at chumbacasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Left out and didn't belong and really didn't fit into that.
It's interesting to hear your perspective on your mum. I wonder, was she born into the IFB belief system, or did she find that herself and convert or join when she was a bit older?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So my maternal grandparents, they were recruited into the IFB. I think it was in the 1970s, and they were, my mom's parents, they were originally Methodist. And what happened was a waitress recruited my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, she gave them a gospel track. So this track that gives them this feeling of certainty of the afterlife, and also of a church that would give them purpose and give them a very enclosed community. So, I don't remember much of my papa. That's what I called him growing up, but because he died when I was like 5 years old. But my maternal grandmother, just from what I saw growing up, she I mean, obviously I wasn't even alive when she was recruited, but I can imagine just from seeing the results of it, I think she just got really dedicated and really obsessed with it. And I would say to the point of like having a religious addiction, I think. Um, and she was just so stern, so obsessed with like following rules, very judgmental of people who didn't conform to what she believed. And they just really got into it. And so my maternal grandparents, they had 3 children. My mom is the middle of 3. She had an older brother and a younger sister. The older brother also got heavily indoctrinated into it, and he is still he was basically a preacher boy, and he's still a preacher in the IFB, and he heavily focuses on the end times, and that is something that IFB does focus on a lot. And my mom's younger sister, she married a pastor in the IFB, which then they switched to Calvinism, which that was a whole mess in our family. That was caused so many issues, which I don't have to get into now. But with my mom, she got heavily involved into it because I think her mother did, and she wanted to please her mother. And I think she did really believe it. And so she grew up in the IFB and eventually made her way to Hiles Anderson College, which, that was Shaq Hiles College, connected to the First Baptist Church of Hammond, like the leading church, I would say, in the IFB movement. And that's where she met my dad. Now, with my dad, his mom was the one that got involved with the IFB. I don't remember exactly how that happened. And she just really got into it with just the rules, the certainty, the community, the purpose, the feeling special and set apart. And my paternal grandfather, it took him a little bit to get into it, but once he did, oh my God, did he get into it? And he, in his later years, he passed away almost a year ago. Wow. And he got in just heavily indoctrinated into the IFB and then was convinced about it really got he became MAGA and was convinced that like Trump, like I remember him posting before it recently, like before he died, posting Trump nailed on a cross. And I was like, you know what? Like it's time to block grandpa on Facebook because I cannot deal with this. And he bought into the vaccine conspiracy theories, and he told us not to get the vaccine. It was the mark of the beast. So there's a lot of connections between conspiracy theories, fundamentalist Christianity, and Christian nationalism is also heavily into the IFB because I remember being taught growing up, and even my grandfather believed this, that like America or the United States was like God's second Israel in a sense. Like we were another chosen nation by God, and that's why we were such a prosperous nation. And that if we went away from these fundamentalist Christian ideals, that would not be the case anymore. So there's this sense of urgency of saving people from eternal damnation, but also this sense of urgency to put their religion in the government to save the country from judgment from God. So, for example, when gay marriage was legalized in 2015, in my church growing up, I remember America now being compared to Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, oh no, now God is going to judge our nation and maybe possibly destroy us like he did Sodom and Gomorrah. So there's this extreme fear of anything outside of their ideology because they believe that it's the truth, and that veering away from that means eternal damnation for people and also judgment on the country.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.
Hearing you concisely summarize the fear factor and the QAnon adjacent conspiratorial thinking within the IFB specifically is really interesting after some discussions that I've had recently about the separation of church and state, dominion theology, and Christian nationalism. Figures like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Amy Coney Barrett and other individuals who are religiously affiliated, fundamentally religiously affiliated, and also working in the sphere of government and law enforcement. So to hear you speak about it in that way, I feel like you've given clarity to some thoughts that I've had swimming around in my mind and not really been able to nuance what those thoughts are. And I feel like I'm realizing now that the extremism and the themes and ideologies within the Bible, if you are taking those as truth, if you are saying that everything in the Bible is literal and that's exactly how everything happened, I feel like there are themes and events in the Bible that if you were to change the names and modernize them to things happening in today's age could also be seen as very conspiratorial
Mhm.
and not likely to be possible. I feel like if somebody came to you and said, "Oh, did you know that Mike and Susie down the road something 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 Bible related?" You'd be like, "Well, I don't know if that's entirely possible, let alone true."
Mhm.
So I feel like you've given me the ability now to realize that fundamental Christian spaces like the IFB lend themselves to conspiratorial thinking because individuals are indoctrinated to be in those places to begin with. So I imagine it's not too much of a drastic step for individuals like your grandfather, for example, to then say, "Oh, well, I have this set of beliefs, and now I'm going to start including these other parts of different belief systems
Mhm.
that also happen to further the agenda of Christian fundamentalism, if that makes sense."
That does. And what I've noticed, I think it's called confirmation bias. You're looking for information that confirms what you already believe, whether you're interpreting that information accurately or not. So when I talk to people about like these different prophecies in the Bible, like the mark of the beast, for example, it's a very general prophecy. That's the thing about it. So you can take anything and apply it. So it was very easy. Okay, so for the mark of the beast, you're going to be forced to take this mark or whatever, and you cannot buy or sell or go anywhere without it. It was very easy to say, oh my gosh, they're going to say that we won't be able to work or go anywhere without taking the vaccine. This is the mark of the beast. Again, the Bible never talks about a vaccine or like again it's just very general, so you can find things that have happened and make those correlations together. And so there are different prophecies about like I don't know, a three-headed beast coming here and doing this, and they're like, oh well, these are different countries that are going to engage in war. So I remember being told Russia is going to be the one to start this, and it was very freaky to me when Russia came after Ukraine, and that kind of religious trauma triggered. And I'm like, oh my God, they said this would happen. They said Russia would come down like it says in the Bible. And that freaked me out. But then I was like, well, I'm like, it's not rocket science
They've
because
been
Russia.
threatening it for a long time.
Yes, they have. So I'm like, that's nuts. Because of me trying to logically try to work through that and be like, oh, that's kind of like a no-brainer. And, countries have always been fighting. The war,
Yeah.
sadly, it's so sad, something that's always been going on. But it's just them trying to, again, to confirm what they
Mm.
already believe, trying to find the specifics of that. And so again, with like the Antichrist and the one world order that they're so scared of and that they talk about, um, I've seen a lot of conspiracies on TikTok recently. It's kind of scary to me because as I'm doing research for things, the TikTok algorithm then thinks I'm a fundamentalist Christian.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Twitter thinks that I'm like anti woke and is showing me all sorts of things that I absolutely just do not want to see.
Yeah.
So I am with you on those aggressive algorithms of skewer
Oof.
with I feel like I'm having an existential crisis.
Yes, and so there's been a lot of conspiracy theories with the United Nations recently putting out some kind of statement about basically this global plan, or really, I don't think it's going to happen, but they want to help everyone to have food and water and have their needs met. Everyone. And they want nations to work together. Again, this is something that these fundamentalist Christians look at and they're like, oh my gosh, this is the one world order that they're going for, having us all together in unity like this and blah, blah, blah. And the Antichrist is going to come up. And like, they've guessed many times what they thought the Antichrist, like they thought Obama was the Antichrist. And that didn't work out. But
Yeah. It's difficult though, because from speaking with Mike Rothschild, what we've been able to understand through that conversation around QAnon is that so many baseless claims are made
Mhm.
that statistically one or two of them are likely to happen, and when the rest of them don't, it is argued by conspiratorial thinking at that point
Mhm.
that it's 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 been stopped by the deep state, or something has stopped those
Uh-huh.
things from happening. They would have happened if it wasn't for this
Yes.
and this
The
and the
cognitive
stolen election.
dissonance.
So
Oof.
then it bolsters and reinforces a belief system.
Yeah.
It's almost like
Mm-hmm.
with the Liana Shanti uh conversations that have been taking place with individuals who have loved ones involved with her teachings. If you tell them Liana Shanti is dangerous, she has already made those people believe that loved ones are going to say things like Liana Shanti is dangerous. So as soon as you say
Uh,
that, the people following her teachings are like, oh my goodness, she knew that that's what our loved ones would tell us,
yeah.
so she must be right, so they must be
Yeah.
abusing us, so this must be a
Mm,
family cult. So I'm now gonna go further away from my family and closer to the person who's taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from me allegedly. So I guess we see these patterns all over the place. And what
mm-hmm.
is interesting about what you've told us is it's the homeschooling situation and setup is very similar to what Heather Grace Heath told us when she came on the show to talk about Lovingly Abused, her memoir, and her experiences in the IFB, but also as a part of the Institute for Basic Life Principles, which is Bill Gothard's IBLP. And it's my understanding, and this is where some things get a bit blurry, that the IBLP is a Christian organization that was started by Bill Gothard and is an umbrella organization for many different ministries inside of it. So, for example, you might be Calvinistic, you might be part of the IFB, and you can still be a member of or a part of Bill Gothard's Institute for Basic Life Principles. And it's like a different seminars and different workshops on how to be the best type of fundamentalist Christian. And included in that is, how to homeschool your children. Here's a curriculum. How best to preach. Here's a
Mm-hmm.
workshop. How best to tell stories. Here's a storytelling group of people that's made up of men, which to Heather Grace Heath's ultimate disappointment meant she could never be a storyteller. But now, of course, she is. And I think that
Yeah.
that is the most beautiful thing. So just to clarify for anybody listening what I meant by IBLP, because I don't want to start slipping into cult terms myself of explaining what they mean. And you also said something about a preacher boy. Your uncle was a preacher boy, and you were laughing when you were saying it. So I'm guessing that preacher boy also means something significant. I'm going to assume it's the type of person that moves up all the different levels within the church, goes to ministry school to become a preacher, and has a life goal of
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.
Becoming head of their own church, maybe? Is that what that
Yes.
would mean?
Yes. And, it was funny to me because it's so common in these environments. And really, that's, and this was interesting because my parents bought into just about everything that IFB said and followed it. But there was one thing they openly, well, not to everyone else, but to telling me and my brothers. I have a younger brother and an older brother. The one thing they would disagree with was there would be times where the IFB would demand that teen boys in that environment or in the church would devote themselves to full-time ministry. That we were told, this is your purpose. This is why God put you on this earth. This is eternity. This is what you're supposed to do. You need to be in the full-time ministry. And I remember a service where I think there was a guest preacher at the church. He was calling for parents to come up with their teen boys and dedicate them to full-time ministry. And my parents disagreed with that. And here's why. I think I had mentioned my dad went to Hyles-Anderson College, which is the IFB college, and he was a preacher boy. He dedicated his life to it. He, got a bachelor's degree in pastoral ministry or something like that. And then he went into the field believing that, oh my gosh, this is God's plan for my life. I am so special. This is why God put me on this planet. Just these euphoric feelings of just feeling chosen. And also, you don't have to plan out your life. You're given a purpose, you're given a set of rules, you're given the structure, so you don't have to do any planning. Just follow the rules, pray, obey, and just repeat. And when he was in the ministry, now he's never talked to me or my brothers about being in the ministry, but my mom has. I've never heard him talk about it, but she told me how miserable he was being a preacher and a pastor. And just for, I guess, a timeline, this all happened before I was born and my brothers were born. So my parents, they got married in the early 90s after they graduated from Hyles-Anderson. It took them 7 years to have children. They didn't think they were going to have any children. And so I think that's another piece in the puzzle or whatever that I think made them more dedicated. They prayed and prayed and prayed for God to give them children. And when God, and it's in air quotes, when God did, they were wanting to dedicate us to God and raise us how they thought God would. So in this very strict authoritarian type family and fundamentalist style. But I think my dad felt really bitter at the church and at the IFB for, I think, really manipulating him into becoming an IFB preacher, because this is basically the purpose of men in the IFB. Women aren't allowed to preach or become pastors or have any leadership positions. They're supposed to be silent and submissive. And so here he went. And I think another thing, a part of it too, is like the social acceptance. I noticed for me, when I knew that I was not going to be in the full-time ministry and I was not going to spread the IFB message as my full-time career the rest of my life, when I openly told people, oh yeah, I'm not going to be in the ministry, I could tell people treated me differently and really as less than or disappointed. And the people who were dedicating their lives to the full ministry, they were just surrounded by people and just praised. So that social acceptance, I think that people got, especially men, from dedicating themselves to it. There was just the attention that they got, the admiration that they got, and they were told this is your plan. So, but my parents disagreed with that because of their own personal experience. If they had never experienced that for themselves, I think that would have never happened. And my own mom has even said, she's like, I wonder how our family would have turned out if he would have stayed a pastor. Because I think deep down inside, even though I don't think my mom would, maybe she would, but
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
we're a dysfunctional family. We were like, she would like to, everyone thought we were the perfect family, and we were not perfect at all. Very dysfunctional, very codependent, a very authoritarian parenting style that my parents had. And like, we weren't allowed to express negative emotions. We weren't allowed to have different opinions. And I was always told growing up, adults are always right, even when they're wrong. You're supposed to submit to authority no matter what. And the IFB highly, highly encourages and parents to spank their children until they submit without question. And that's what my parents did. So I was a very submissive child. I was very people pleasing, because I realized that in order to be loved and accepted, I had to conform. And that's how I got that. But because of that, a lot of my own needs were unmet, and a lot of things were not addressed in our family as we grew up.
It feels similar to a conversation I had with a woman called Sue recently, who experienced a very overbearing, difficult, narcissistic family, but also, and I'm not saying that those are the things that you would apply to your family, but then also had this difficult religious experience, and then went on to have another experience that was similar to those two first experiences. So it's almost as if you've got two authoritarian environments in your life that coexist, but also independently exist and control your life. And that, I imagine, getting your head around after leaving is quite something to try and do. Pull apart the experiences that you had with your family, but also with the church, and try and work out which parts you keep, which parts you leave behind, which parts came from the church, which parts came from your parents and their parents. Oh my goodness, Andrew, where do you even start?
Yeah.
With the homeschooling curriculum, oh gosh, I feel like that's so unfair, because I'd love to collect things and I want stickers and badges, and I know that I would be going out and I would be like, I want this badge, I'm gonna knock on my neighbor's door and I'm gonna get that badge one way or another. And I feel like that's a really unfair thing to do with children. We just did an episode on another podcast, the Cosmic Pizza podcast, the other day, where we talked about favorite childhood toys and games, and we were discussing collecting things, Pokemon cards, football stickers, and the end result of having your sticker books and badges and collections is the same as, me collecting Pokemon cards and whatnot. So when it came to those types of tasks, do you feel like you were somebody that was all in with those things? Did you go out and want to collect your badges and stickers?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because part of me is wondering, as I've been in therapy and working through my own childhood, I was heavily dedicated to it. It was really into it and was at one time was a fundamentalist Christian. But looking back, I see that I had so much to lose if I wasn't dedicated. You know, my acceptance depended on me conforming and happily doing it and doing all these things. Looking back, I think I happily or really eagerly was very competitive because of my mother was very competitive, and I had a very codependent relationship with my mother, so I wanted to do anything I could to please her and to not bother her. And I think part of that was getting these badges. And another thing, I had an older brother who was a couple of years ahead of me, or I think three. He got all the badges and did all the things. So I have to live in his shadow. And so I'm like, I have to do all these things too. And I did. And I got all the awards, I got all the plaques. I did all these things. It's funny. I last year I found my Master Club vest with all the just covered in badges in my parents' house, and I brought it back to my home in Greenville, where I'm currently living. And I recorded a video on it. I haven't released it yet, but I'm just digging into all these different badges that I got and the things I had to do, and looking back and being like, wow, just the indoctrination that happened.
Yeah.
And I realized too that my mom wanted me so desperately to win all these badges and do these things because it made her look good. It made the family look good. The reputation, like these IFB families and even the churches, it's all about the reputation and what everyone thinks and how it looks. You're supposed to look like the most spiritual or most godly family. And in addition to Masters Club would have these Bible competitions. Um, and there was one that was hosted at our church. A lot of things were hosted at our church because it was so massive. But um, it was basically you would have these different flashcard games you would go to. There would be a period where you would do it on an individual level and compete, and then you would also do it on a team level from your church. So I felt that pressure to make my church look really good and to win all these things on an individual level, but also on a team level. And I think another thing that made me laugh about Preacher Boy was there was a Preacher Boy category at this competition, and it was something that I did one year. I was a Preacher Boy at a regionals Masters Club competition. I only did it one time. If I didn't like it at all. Um, and a Sunday school teacher from the church had helped me practice to for the Preacher Boy category. But yeah, just looking back, it's like all these different elements and areas of indoctrination, just going to the church and being exposed to the sermons, being in the Masters Club, Bible Club, then these competitions, and then being homeschooled
Yeah.
by these fundamentals. So like every aspect of my life was just indoctrination, and it was just so overwhelming. And it's just, to me, looking back, I'm like, I think I still have so much more to grieve of my childhood, but just looking back and being like, just let me be a fucking kid. Let me be a fucking kid. You tell me from I'm probably earlier than 5 years old that I'm going to hell. And then even as a young child saying that, you know, you need to share the gospel with people, that you could be responsible for people's eternal damnation, people's blood could be on your hands, and just being told all these graphic, horrible things about hell and the end times. I'm like, oh my gosh, just let kids be kids.
Yeah. And weaponizing the necessity for play, which is a huge developmental part of a
Mm-hmm.
child's brain, cognitively and communally, and deploying you to evangelize to people without even really fully ever understanding what it means to go knock on people's doors and
Mm-hmm.
spread the gospel or the mission or the doctrine or whatever, to fulfill things that you have to do for your homeschool curriculum it just feels like really intrusive on so many levels. not like knocking on somebody's door to sell Girl Scout cookies, although I'm sure we could talk a bit about that.
Oh no. Do you need
Sorry.
water?
No, it's okay. I don't know. I was just getting angry, but in my throat,
Oof.
especially because I can hear my children like settling down for
Oof.
bed, and it really upsets me to think about their choices being taken from them in that way, all because of somebody else's beliefs. You said earlier, I can respect your beliefs, but I don't think we should be pushing them on other people. I would never ever say to people, wow, you should be atheist. Do you know your bad things are going to happen to you if you're not an atheist? Oh, let me sit you down and tell you why really bad things are definitely happening to you because you're not atheist. Anyway, that's just I'll ask my partner
Hmm.
to edit that part out. So as you're moving through your homeschool curriculum and your parents are, I guess, having discussions with you about what your plans are for further education,
Hmm.
have you made any decisions in your mind of what you'd like to do? Or do you feel like there's only a few options
Hmm.
for you because you're being told what's expected of you once you
Hmm.
complete your homeschooling?
Yeah, so I would say the thing that was nice was that my parents did not buy into you have to go into the full-time ministry, and it was because of their experience. So they were not pressuring me of you have to be a preacher or you have to go into the ministry. There was still a different aspect of what they told me what they expected, and just from a young age I remember my mom telling me, she was like, no matter what you do, I pray that you're a full-time Christian, which she meant in the IFB, really. She's like, I pray that you'll stay a full-time Christian your entire life, and I pray that you'll have a Sunday school class at your church that you're at. So from a young age, that was the pressure that, oh yeah, you have to be in this belief system the rest of your life and you have to be a full-time Christian. So that means every aspect of your life is influenced by this belief system. You read the Bible and pray every day. You regularly go to an IFB church, and like the expectation of having a Sunday school class was kind of weird to me, but I was like, whatever. And so there was that pressure. And I even though a lot of the creativity and stuff was stifled through the fundamentalist homeschooling, I think, have options to explore other things, especially when I had my own free time. When it came to leisure time, when I wasn't doing homeschooling or I wasn't at church or I wasn't doing the master club stuff or having to do my daily devotions, when I wasn't doing that, all these things are, going. I think even 4-H club, that did 4-H did help me explore different things too. But the only time I felt at peace in my childhood was when I could be alone or
Oh,
when I could swing. I would, and I talked to my therapist about this. I tell my therapist, I'm like, I would just swing and swing for hours and hours whenever I could and just like disassociate. And I talked about it to my therapist. He's like, yeah, he's like rocking back and forth. He's like, that's a very that calms
self-soothing.
it soothes us, it calms down our nervous system. And he's like, it's natural to us because it's done to us from a young age when we're children. Our mother rocks us back and forth. And he's like, that was a coping mechanism for you to deal with that.
Wow.
And for me, there was a forest that was near the neighborhood that I I was at this it was this a house I moved to when I was 8. I lived in one neighborhood and then I moved to another one at 8. So from 8 and upwards, there was this forest in my neighborhood that I would, when I could, go to by myself and just enjoy nature. I had always loved nature growing up, and it was nice because I didn't feel in that forest the pressure to do anything. I didn't have someone telling me to do this or do that, or to think this or think that, feel that, don't feel that. it was just so calming to me. And so those were the times of peace I think that I felt in that.
That is the end of part 1 of this mini-series with podcast host Andrew Pledger. To find out more about Andrew's work, you can follow the links in the episode description. And to get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.